Hey there, and welcome back to Tim Talks Cooking. Today we are talking keto pie crust, my friend. You heard me right, keto pie crust. And we're going to compare two different kinds, one made with coconut flour, the other made with almond flour. Which do you prefer? Which is better? Which holds up best? I don't know. Let's find out and make some pie crusts. So let's get started. Here's what you'll need to make the almond flour crust. It starts off with 2½ cups of blanched almond flour, and you can see that it's finely ground. You'll also need 1/4 cup of unsalted butter with 1/2 teaspoon of kosher salt. We're going to melt that in a minute in the microwave. You'll also want 1 large egg. The process is the same for mixing each kind of crust. We're going to start off by putting the flour in this case the almond flour. I'll put that into my food processor. You can do this by hand, of course. You can also use a hand mixer. My butter is melted, and I'm just going to go ahead and pour that on in. I've added in the egg as well here, and now we're going to put on the top of the food processor and give it a whirl. You really can't overmix this because it doesn't have any gluten, of course. There we go. And you can see it's come together in a nice sort of a ball shape, more or less. Next, we're simply going to transfer it to our 9-inch springform pan. You could use a 9-inch pan that doesn't have a springform. This will just be easy to unmold. And in both cases here, I'm going to pre-bake the crust. That is, bake it before I put the filling in it. With this crust, we're just simply going to use our hand and smush it down into the bottom. And I'm going to continue on like this until I've covered it evenly. To make the crust as even and smooth, use a measuring cup or some other smooth-bottomed device to smooth it out. And you get a very even layer of crust this way, and it also helps you push it up into the sides so that it will hold the filling in. Continue on until you've got a nice, thin and evenly distributed pie crust. And while you're doing this, preheat your oven to 350 degrees. And here's how it looks once you've finished pressing the dough into the sides and everything. You want to be careful to make sure that down here in the corners of the pan that it doesn't get all bunched up there, so just use your finger to push it around. It's actually very easy to work with. Before we stick this in our 350 degree oven for 12 to 15 minutes here, we're going to just prick the bottom a little bit with a fork to prevent it from bubbling up. I've also reserved about 1 tablespoon of that crust mixture out. This is the almond crust mixture, and I put it in a custard cup. I'm going to bake it along with the pie crust so that at the end of the video I can compare it without ruining the pie crust, which I want to use for another dish and another video. And here it is after 12 minutes. Here's my little custard cup that's been in the oven as well. To me, they look like they need a little bit more time. You may notice when you're cooking with almond and coconut flour that they tend to brown and burn at lower temperatures. Here you can see it's starting to brown around here. We don't want that to go too far, but you can see down here it's still very white, and we've got a lot of butter bubbling through there. This is going back in the oven for 3 to 5 more minutes. Here we are 3 minutes later. You can see this is a little browner around here, just very pale and kind of gorgeous there. This is a lighter color, at least that's visible to me here, maybe not on camera with the lighting that I have. Here's the custard cup. This looks really good to me too. It's starting to, let me just show you, starting to brown on the bottom along here. And that's good enough for me because here we're going to fill this with a filling and put it back in the oven at some point much later on. So I'm going to stop here with this. We're going to let that cool off completely. Let's get to that other crust. Here's what you'll need to make the coconut flour crust. Starts off with 3/4 cup of coconut flour, 1/3 cup of butter with 1/4 teaspoon of kosher salt. We're going to melt that in the microwave in a second, and 2 large eggs. For the coconut flour crust, we're going to start by putting our 3/4 cup of coconut flour. And notice that's a lot less stuff than we put into the almond flour. this pie crust is going to have about half the calories of the almond flour crust. Got our third of a cup of butter here. Melted. And our eggs, we don't really need to beat them or anything. We're just going to stick one in there. On goes the lid. We give them a whoosh. And as you can see, now there's a lot less material in here. This is not really forming a ball yet. This is a bit of a mess. That's all right, that's what we want. I want to just make sure that we scrape down our food processor bowl really quickly so everything gets incorporated well. And also you can see now it's starting to sort of absorb all of the liquid in there. And it will form a ball. Actually, in just a moment when I turn this back on. And here we go, as you can see, right there, pretty much sticks together. That's exactly what we want. Here, as you can see, I'm removing this to a piece of plastic wrap. Kind of dry and crumbly, but again, it's held together here with butter and egg, so this is going to stick together pretty well. We want this to go into the refrigerator to allow the coconut flour to absorb the liquids completely, as well as just to get it to firm up a little bit before we put it in the oven. So here I'm going to make kind of a log out of it. There we go. And I'm going to wrap it up just like this. And stick it in the refrigerator for a half an hour. Here I've got my coconut flour dough that's just out of the fridge after a half an hour, and I've taken about a tablespoon of it and put it in the bottom of this blue custard cup. I'm going to bake that along with the actual crust itself. Here I've got a 7-inch springform pan. This is slightly smaller than the one we use for the almond flour crust. And what we're going to do here is we're just going to simply transfer all of this dough as best we can here to our springform pan. And you can see it's a little bit crumbly. That's fine. That's really what we want here. Otherwise, it might be a little hard to press into the form here. And here I'm just going to use my fingers to press it into my form. And I'm going to try to make the sides as high as possible on this. Take your time when you do this. This dough is really pretty forgiving, but you've got to make sure that you, for example, press it out of the corners of the pan here. Make sure you get your sides even and as high as possible. I'm just about done here. And this is going to go into a 350-degree oven for 10 to 15 minutes, just like the other pie crust. Before you put it in the oven, though, don't forget to prick the bottom with the fork so that it doesn't bubble up too much. Do that here like this. There we go. And maybe do that with our little custard cup too. Why not? Into a 350-degree oven they go then for 10 to 15 minutes. And here we are after 13 minutes in my oven. You can see, if you can see into the custard cup well, it's browning around the edges here. In the 7-inch springform pan also, just lightly brown around the edges here and nice and firm in the middle. We're done here. We're going to let these cool off and then we're going to taste our samples. And here we have them side by side. This is the coconut flour crust and here's the almond flour crust. Well, all right, let's give these a taste. Here we've got the almond flour crust. Really nice. It's got a little bit of a crunch. Not as much as a shortbread crust made with wheat flour, mind you, but it's got a little bit of one. And unlike most things I make with almond flour, even cookies and stuff, this actually tastes a little bit like almonds, so it's kind of nutty, very pleasant, really delicious, I gotta say. Here we've got the coconut flour crust. Give that a little try here. Also has a little bit of a crunch. It's very nice. It does taste just a little bit like coconut flour. You know, both of these crusts can be sweetened with some erythritol or whatever sweetener you like to use. I prefer a savory crust like this, even when I make a sweet filling. So there you go, up to you to decide. I can't really say which one is better than the other. I like them both, and in fact, stay tuned because my next couple of videos are going to contain the pies that these were made for. Listen, thanks so much for joining us here today at Tim Talks Cooking. Before you go, please don't forget to like, share, comment, and especially subscribe to my channel. It helps my channel grow, and it also helps you find my videos, especially if you click on that notifications bell. Thanks for joining us again here today at Tim Talks Cooking. We'll catch you next time.